Hey y'all, hey. Today we're going to meet a civil rights pioneer, another unsung hero of the movement, and Mr. Thurgood Marshall's mentor, Charles Hamilton Houston. So good, he had to have three last names. Now, Charles could be a first or a last name. But this young man was the first general counsel of the NAACP, and he exposed the hollowness of the separate but equal ideology that plagued the South and segregation supporters. And he is the reason why the Supreme Court ruled it as not really true. So he also had the nickname of the man who killed Jim Crow. How about that? So this young man was born in Washington, D.C. in 1895. He enrolled in Amherst College at the age of 16 and was the only black student in his class. He earned a bachelor's degree, magna cum laude, in 1915 and was elected to the Phi Beta Kappa honors group. After teaching in Washington, D.C. for 2 years, he joined the segregated U.S. Army as an officer. He left in 1919, just before the Red Summer began. So, Mr. Houston, he did experience racial discrimination from his fellow countrymen while he was serving in World War II as a first lieutenant. He served in France, and he said the hate and scorn showered on us Negro officers by fellow Americans convinced me that there was no sense in my dying for a world ruled by them. I made up in my mind that if I got through this war, I would study law and use my time fighting for men who could not strike back. And so, a man of his word, that's what he did. And his legal brilliance, his ability to argue that separate but equal was hollow and not true, gave him that nickname, the man who killed Jim Crow. And also, he fought for other civil rights cases. We're going to get on to that. Mr. Houston returned to the U.S. in 1919 after after entering into Harvard Law, and became the first student on the editorial board of the Harvard Law Review, the first black student. Charles Houston entered Harvard Law at the tail end of Red Summer of 1919, a very violent period in which whites, veterans, and children terrorized black neighborhoods in 26 cities across the United States. So we're talking Tulsa, we're talking Rosewood, things like that. I believe Tulsa did happen in 1919. But basically, it was northern and midwestern states mostly. Of course, Rosewood is like towards the Floridian area. But my point is, and Rosewood wasn't listed here, it's just one of the things I remember of a black town being completely wiped out by white civilians. Now, the civilians were just old or middle-aged men. It was children. There was one photograph I saw where white kids came over, took over a whole school in Chicago. It was a 2-story building. They kicked everybody out. It was like paper hanging out. Like, white folks was big time mad about black folks migrating to the South, possibly taking their jobs, and how dare they come back after World War I, which ended around 1917, 1918, and you think you finna come over here and talk to us any kind of way with your uppity self? You think you're equal to us now because you served in the same war that we did? And that was written in there. Go research Red Summer. I read some of it. Again, I already knew about Tulsa. I already knew about some of the cities that were taken over. I know there's one in Louisiana as well, where it was a prominent black city, and it was taken over because they love to say, go get your own. And then when we get our own, you either come in and try to take up all the property and buy up the property and make the value go down to take over more land, or you have the whole redlining thing, or you like do what happened in Red Summer where they come in and they burn stuff down, baby. And that's what really happened. Tulsa was an amazing Negro city, and it was wiped out because they didn't want blacks to think they were better than them. And it was even written that like some people were upset that they believed black folks were corrupted by black people who served in the military were corrupted by Russians and the Bolsheviks, and they're the ones who gave them the idea that they should have equal rights. And a lot of the laws that were implemented during the Reconstruction era after the Civil War were rolled back during this time, and Jim Crow crept its little ugly head all the way in, including in northern cities. And that's why you have places like Ohio and Indiana that's even worse than Mississippi, baby. Off of my red summer tangent, back to Mr. Hamilton. Black Americans lost hard-won legal and political gains while experiencing deadly white-on-black violence, especially black soldiers who returned from World War I. Now, after graduating from Harvard with the Doctorate of Law degree in 1923 and studying at the University of Madrid in 1924, Houston was admitted to the District of Columbia's bar and joined his father in a practice. The practice was named Houston & Houston. It was one of the first black law firms established in D.C. That just was completely for black people, as Houston believed that the average white lawyer, especially in the South, could not be relied upon to wage an uncompromising fight for the equal rights of African Americans. This is a picture of the younger Mr. Houston and his father and his mom. So later, Houston does serve as dean of Howard University and teaches there part-time, and then that's when he got to mentor Mr. Thurgood Marshall. Houston left Howard University to serve as the first general counsel, a pivotal role for the Supreme Court, and the first general counsel of the NAACP, by the way. And so he argued a lot of cases for in the Supreme Court for over 2 decades before the landmark Brown versus Board of Education ruling, which wouldn't have been able to get that far if it wasn't for Mr. Houston fighting against the Jim Crow laws. Houston's fight against school segregation made him famous. His legal strategy was to end segregation by showing that facilities that were separate but equal was a lie. And in 1938, the Supreme Court case concerning admissions of a black man to the University of Mississippi, which Mr. Houston argued, the SCOTUS stated that it was unconstitutional for the state to bar blacks for admission since there was no separate but equal facility. At the time, Southern states collectively spent half of what they allotted for white students on education for blacks. So Houston was able to make it too expensive for these poor red states to even create a whole nother separate facility. While not rejecting a separate but equal schools ideology, the Supreme Court ruled that black students could be admitted to a white school if there was only one school. Houston's strategy paved the way for desegregation and integration. Let's see, which is the same thing, but Houston would not live, unfortunately, to see the Brown versus Board of Education, which was argued by his mentee, Mr. Marshall, because he died on April 22nd, 1950, from a heart attack. So he died 4 years before that Supreme Court decision was made. And after his death, Houston was awarded the NAACP Spingarn, I'll be saying that wrong, SPINGARN medal in 1950 after his death. I think I just said that. And the main building of the Howard University School of Law was named Charles Hamilton Houston Hall in 1958. And lastly, Harvard Law School named a professorship after him and opened the Charles Hamilton Houston Institute for Race and Justice in 2005. Whew. Give it up for Mr. Hamilton Houston. And yeah, that is it for today. What an awesome individual with heart, baby. Especially arguing cases in the South. I'll be back tomorrow with another civil rights leader. I will focus on Mr. Marion Barry. Now, that's an interesting young man, far from the prestige of Mr. Hamilton. Lord, we'll get to that. I remember Mr. Barry, too. I remember in the 90s, the D.C. mayor who gets caught doing something un-mayor-like. See you tomorrow. Bye.